Thank you for choosing Tox News, a Portland Rebellion broadcast. I'm your host, the Wacko Weirdo, Rebel Scum Jedi Hero. After a long hiatus of about 5-6 days, who can really remember? Got a big episode, so strap in, because since I took the time off, there's a lot to go through. I was planning on do this Sunday, recording it on a Monday, but Sunday I ate a bagel and some burritos and couldn't really find the revolutionary muster to get the episode done, so here we are. So what exactly do we have today? Well, it looks like we're going to go over the ridiculousness that is the government spending. It was of heated debate for about 6 days after President Trump refused to sign the COVID relief bill that was strapped onto the omnibus spending bill that Congress passes about every year. And so, where are we going to go through? All of it. We're going through all of it. And I want to begin the story on Twitter. Yeah. So let's head on over there on the screen. Check it out on YouTube, Tox News, if you want to see all my sources. But let's scroll up here a little bit, get through all of this nonsense right here, get through all of this nonsense. I tweet a lot. Okay, so I must have left these ones down further. Preparation is key. Wow, where did I put the, there's very important stuff in here, and I can't seem to find exactly where I had put it. You see health, All right, so, it would come, I think, the 21st? Or the 22nd, I believe it was the 20th or 21st, actually. But it says here that Congress passes COVID-19 relief spending package with overwhelming support. And you ask, well, how much support, right? And I say, the Senate voted 92-6 late Monday. So that was, the 21st, to approve the infusion of coronavirus aid together with a $1.4 trillion spending bill that will fund the government through September 2021. Initially, the Senate's presiding officer said the vote was 91-7, which was later corrected to 92-6, meaning 6 voted against this. And let's remember that the Senate is still at a high Republican lead, so, they voted all for it. Everybody was down for it. And then Trump kind of surprised everybody. He vetoed the bill, saying that $600 wasn't enough and that he wanted $2,000. And then also, there's just too much junk in the omnibus bill, and he's offended that he would be asked to sign it. In fact, in 2018, when Trump had signed the biggest omnibus bill in American history, he said that he would never sign a bill like that ever again. And here we are 2 years later, and he did. He signed it. He did. Spoiler alert to this story, he has signed the bill as of today. But first, I want to get to the reaction of Trump saying $2,000, and I'm going to begin with Amy Klobuchar speaking to Rachel Maddow on MSNBC.
And now he's saying that he's going to veto it. There is some nuance to it, with him saying that he wants a larger size payment to the American people, which is something that Democrats argued for at every step of the process. And now House Democrats say, okay, well, if that's what he wants, we'll provide him with that. I wonder just...
One thing that does bother me about Democrats when they're being interviewed, like Nancy Pelosi did it very often during her heated interview with Wolf Blitzer, but they smile way too much. Smiling way too much. Like, if you're having a serious conversation about financial aid to citizens or just financial aid in general, like if you're in a private room, no cameras on you, I doubt you're smiling as much as Amy Klobuchar is cheesing right now. And I don't like it. I don't like the facade of everything being so pleasant when we're having a pretty serious conversation. Rachel Maddow's face fits the situation, whereas Amy Klobuchar is just putting on this mask, and I'm just saying, I don't like it.
What you make of this very last minute scramble of what we thought was going to proceed here with this relief bill?
I kept thinking tonight, well, these pardons are an attack on our very democracy. This is an attack on every American. People who are struggling to get by right now, out of work, the unemployment is going to basically end the day after Christmas if this doesn't pass. People who are out of work, people who need the help. The vaccine distribution, Rachel, is in this $30 billion. These vaccines are not going to just parachute into a small town in the middle of Minnesota. We need.
So the thing that Amy Klobuchar is focusing on is like, he should have just signed the bill. The Americans need assistance now. What I find very interesting, though, is that she didn't just go, well, yeah, we can give more money to, essential workers and workers in general, citizens. She just said, she really focused in, well, we should just sign the bill that we've negotiated and agreed upon in the Congress. And it's, I don't think Democrats are really that on board to giving everybody $2,000. Of course, they're willing to in the sake of populism and the sake of looking cool. But, deep down in their marrow, I don't think that Amy Klobuchar is an advocate for giving Americans more money than she believes that they need. And that's why she said, just sign the bill. And I can understand, like, yes, there's an urgency to this, but would it have taken that much time to actually, rewrite the $600 and make it $2,000? Would it have changed the bill that much? Maybe increase the spending, or you could reduce, other aspects of the billions of dollars that they're giving out to give more money into that program. But, I don't think it would have really taken that much time to fix one provision, right?
The help for the states to get the vaccines out. And he is literally undermining our entire effort on.
And that's the whole thing, is that I was worried that the government was going to shut down because of the coronavirus bill being attached to the omnibus bill and so much push against the omnibus bill. And so I had originally thought, well, if the government shuts down, they pass the COVID relief money, it's not really going to matter. In the end, that wouldn't matter because we would be stuck. The government wouldn't be able to distribute anything because it's shut down. So I was worried about that, and thanks to Trump, everybody was a little bit worried about that, except for some Republicans. I saw a lot of right-wingers on Twitter saying, like, let it shut down, as if we don't need to distribute vaccines to, nurses, essential workers, and the most vulnerable immediately.
Testing and vaccine distribution. This was a hard-fought negotiation. Of course, you're right. Democrats were pushing for more funds for the individual payments, but
yeah, there was a bill with Bernie Sanders on $2,000. Rashida Tlaib has added an amendment to the bill to make it $2,000, so we'll see if that gets passed. As we're speaking right now, at the time of this recording, they are debating it on the House or the House floor right now. So
in the end, this was a negotiation, and he knows very well we're reaching the end here with the unemployment, with our small businesses can't take it anymore. One Yelp study early in the year showed we were having 800 small businesses close a day. And there's over $300 billion to help small businesses in this bill. It is the second biggest stimulus in the history of America. And for him to turn this down, obviously we have the votes to override his veto in the houses. We have those votes. But he should not be doing this right now when his own Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, was involved in the negotiations from beginning to end.
And that right there shows that most of this was just political posturing. It's all a part of the show. And the exact show that Trump was trying to put on, now that he's actually signed the bill as is, I don't know what the point was other than to maybe stir shit. Because honestly, it just became a debate about all of that foreign aid money, which even Lindsey Graham had admitted was only 1% of American spending.
He is literally trying to burn this country down on his way out, as I said at the beginning. And all we can do is push and make it very clear as we go into these Senate races in Georgia, Rachel, which party has people's back and which party is in the White House.
And so, yeah, my main concern with Amy Klobuchar there was not actually supporting the $2,000 idea. She kind of vaguely said, well, yeah, we had a bill that would, increase the amount of money, but she didn't really sound like she supported it. And I don't think she actually does. Now, let's scroll up because I have yet another um, response here. There it is. Let's get it from the beginning, though. I don't want to start in the middle. Lego.
I don't think the $2,000 checks
This is coming from former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers.
make much sense. The real issue is going to be sustaining this expansion. You think about it, the 908 stimulus bill probably would pay out $200 to $250 billion a month for the next 3 months. The level of compensation is running about $30 billion a month below what we would have expected it would. GDP is running about $70 billion a month below what we would have expected it would. So in a way that's quite unprecedented, we have stimulus already much more than filling out the hole. And given that lots of the hole is from the fact not that people don't want to spend, but that they can't spend because they can't take a flight or they can't go.
And of course, none of that's true because during Thanksgiving, everybody went, like not everybody, but 2 million Americans, 2 million Americans took flights. The airlines are still open. It's actually more consumer confidence that is at risk here. And people being aware that the virus is around are not feeling comfortable spending their money, especially if it has to go into their savings where they might need it later. So it's definitely more of a consumer confidence issue because so far there's only 3 or 4 states that actually have restrictions to going out while the rest have none. They do have, recommendations. And in the state that I live in, everything is open except for theme parks and water parks. But those aren't major drives for our economy. So I had even on somewhere on Twitter, and it would take me forever to look for it, but I had posted to Trump because he said, look at what these lockdowns have done to our country, when really there's only 4 or 5 states that are under social distance restrictions. Actually, like there's a couple places with curfews, and there's other places that actually have their businesses shut down, one of them being California, another being Pennsylvania. But 4 out of 50 states, that shouldn't hurt our GDP and our revenue that much to that extent. It's definitely more of a consumer confidence issue.
Go to a restaurant. I don't necessarily think that the priority should be on promoting consumer spending beyond where we are now. So I'm not even sure that I'm so enthusiastic about the $600 checks. And I think taking them to $2,000 would actually be a pretty serious mistake that would risk a temporary overheat.
But of course, we have the payment protection program, which was reimbursed with the COVID relief bill, which offers billions of dollars to corporations to basically get loaned money, vast amounts of money in order to pay their employees, pay their bills, and bail them out. Hundreds of thousands of dollars going to entrepreneurs and millions upon billions of dollars going to major corporations. The thing is about that too is it's not necessarily, they call it a loan all the time, but there is a stipulation that if you actually report where the money went, you get to keep the money. So as long as the government gets to track the money, then the business or entrepreneur who took out the loan actually gets to keep the money. So
I would like to see more assistance to state and local governments. I would like to see more money put into testing, more money put into accelerating vaccines.
I'm all for that too, but the thing is that of course we do need to support the citizens who have had their hours cut or their even full furloughs have been going on. People have lost their jobs. People have been dipping into their savings for emergencies, and this is a state of emergency. Hospital debt is built by having COVID as well, so I think a bit of relief for the people would go a long way, especially for that consumer confidence and stimulating the economy. Paying off landlords as well.
But gosh, David, I think it would be a real mistake to be going to $2,000. And I have to say that when you see the
Nope, my bad.
red, you can almost be certain that something crazy is in the air. And so when I see a coalition of Josh Hawley, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump getting behind an idea, I think that's time to run for cover.
Yeah, yeah. When Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump agree on something, we should just outright ignore it. Yeah, thanks to the former Treasury Secretary for the wisdom of let's just focus on state and local governments testing, and as if that's not in the bill. Um, let's see here. I just wanted to put this because NBC News had reported, and this has to do with the $2,000, but NBC News says more than 50 million people living in America, including 17 million children, will likely experience food insecurity by the end of the year, according to Feeding America, the country's largest anti-hunger organization. And that reminded me of an old story. It comes from 2012. It's a research article. Several researchers there, one from the Institute for Food and Development Policy, another from the University of Berkeley, California, Berkeley. And the research was from July 2012, and it says here, we already grow enough food for 10 billion people and still can't end hunger, which means the access to food isn't the problem. People having money to access that food is the problem. Because people cannot have food unless they can trade it in for dough. You gotta turn that dough into sustenance for your survival. So that's what I had from Twitter. Now, before we get into the rest of it, I wanted to start with this WRAL article saying, fact check, social media mixes up COVID relief, omnibus bill. It was posted December 23rd with an update on December 23rd, about 4 hours later. So, it's by Miriam Valverde, PolitiFact reporter. Let's get into it. I wanted to get into this because it goes over basically the essentials of what you need to know inside of the omnibus bill, and that's going to be important for the video segments that we are going to get into. So, let's begin. Shortly after lawmakers agreed on sending $600 stimulus checks to many Americans, Facebook users said the COVID-19 relief bill put foreign interests and the arts above the needs of the American people. Quote, every American left and right should be calling for a hashtag veto of this stimulus deal, which provides more funding to foreign governments and to American arts centers than to the American people, said a December 21st post. The post included a picture listing domestic entities in foreign countries appropriated millions, if not billions of dollars, juxtaposed with just $600 for the American people. Under domestic funding, Under domestic funding, for instance, it listed the Kennedy Center getting $26,400,000. And it shows a bit of the post there. I think overall the $600 equates to $166 billion, so keep that in mind. Now let's continue. The post mentioned at least 8 foreign countries receiving aid, including Egypt, Sudan, and Ukraine. According to the post, Egypt would get $1.3 billion. The post was flagged as part of Facebook's efforts to combat false news and misinformation on its newsfeed. The post is right that Congress appropriated funds for foreign aid and for American art centers, and Americans are free to disagree that taxpayer money is allotted in this way. But it's wrong to suggest that such funding is in the COVID-19 relief bill. And I've been on Twitter having that argument, is that yes, you're allowed to disagree with taxpayer money being spent. You know, that's part of your free speech. You can disagree with these things. But unfortunately, we do live in a constitutional representative republic, meaning that we elect people to represent us. And this is the people, this is what you voted for. So if you don't like it, you need to replace your Congress members. You need to call them and let them know that you don't support foreign aid. I, on the other hand, support foreign aid for certain issues. I don't like a lot of things that we spend our money on and for, the motivations behind them. But at the same time, too, foreign aid isn't inherently bad. If you're only like a America First nationalist if you believe that that's just inherently bad, that we shouldn't spend any money foreignly. internationally. But the article continues here. On December 21st, lawmakers in both chambers of Congress passed a $2.3 trillion spending package, a roughly $1.4 trillion omnibus bill consisting of 12 different bills to fund the government during fiscal year 2021, and a separate approximately $900 billion bill specifically for COVID-19 relief. Lawmakers also passed several other small bills. It's the $1.4 trillion part of the package that included funding for U.S. policies and priorities within the country and abroad. The Facebook post conflates provisions of the COVID-19 relief bill with provisions in the omnibus spending bill. COVID-19 relief bill. So, it says, it's been about 9 months since a $2 trillion COVID-19 relief bill was signed into law by President Donald Trump. Some members of Congress were frustrated that legislative leaders released the new bill, 5,593 pages long, just hours before they were expected to vote on it. Some people argue that Americans should be getting more than $600 in direct payments, and the Facebook posts echo that sentiment. At the same time, the posts don't mention the other forms of relief that will be available to some Americans, including unemployment assistance. Overall, the COVID-19 relief bill totals more than $900 billion. Americans who meet specific income criteria are expected to get $600. The relief bill includes about $166 billion for the stimulus checks, according to a breakdown from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget. Here's the group's breakdown of what else is in the bill. $325 billion in aid to small businesses, which includes Paycheck Protection Program, $120 billion for unemployment assistance, $300 a week for 11 weeks, $82 billion for education, such as K-12 education grants, $56 billion for healthcare, includes funding for states to do COVID-19 testing, $45 billion for transportation, includes payroll support program for airline workers, which, again, not public. So that's a bailout for the airlines, specifically from the airlines that is separate from the PPPs. Very interesting. $83 billion of other spending, such as rental assistance, nutrition programs. And $40 billion for other tax cuts, such as extend and expand employee retention tax credit. Funding for foreign countries, arts, and other spending bill. The Facebook post says that lawmakers provided aid to at least 8 foreign countries in the COVID-19 relief package, including $1.3 billion to Egypt. That's not part of the COVID-19 relief bill. The omnibus spending bill, under the header Foreign Military Financing Program, says that $1.3 billion is to remain available until September 30th, 2022, and should be made available for assistance for Egypt. It stipulates several conditions for the disbursement of those funds. For instance, $225 million will be withheld until the Secretary of State certifies and reports to Congress that the Egyptian government has taken steps to improve the rule of law, democratic institutions, and human rights. Which, to be perfectly honest with you, and this is not the article, but me saying that Egypt has been pretty bad at those things. So I guess incentivizing them is an interesting way to get them to stop monetarily. But at the same time, I don't know. It's hard to say just because we do have a lot of issues here domestically. But I do hope that it can steer them into a more democratic state. Unfortunately, they are not. So the article continues. Appropriation bills usually include foreign aid, commonly for military and humanitarian aid, which is funny as fuck because we fund both. Because, military aid and humanitarian aid kind of like, I don't know, they conflict with each other in certain aspects. It goes on to say here, our reporting has shown that foreign aid historically represents about 1% of the overall federal budget, which is something that Lindsey Graham had said on Fox. Polling has shown that average Americans assume the U.S. spends about 31% of its budget on foreign aid. The omnibus spending part of the package passed by Congress also calls for $26.4 million to remain available until September 30th, 2022 for the John F. Kennedy Center's Operation Maintenance and Security. The Facebook post flags that appropriation, but omits that it's part of the omnibus spending bill, not part of the COVID-19 relief bill. The domestic funding and foreign countries funding in the post are part of the omnibus spending bill, not the COVID-19 relief bill. The total of the foreign aid and domestic funding mentioned in the Facebook post is not greater than the funding in the COVID-19 relief bill. So, no pay raise for Congress. Other Facebook posts also claimed wrongly that Congress snuck a pay raise for its members into the new legislation. It did not. The same claim was made about the CARES Act in March. As we reported, congressional pay raises are fixed to the Employment Cost Index, which measures changes in wages. Pay increases are automatic unless Congress votes them down, which it has done repeatedly since 2009, according to the Congressional Research Service. Section 7 of the legislation says, quote, notwithstanding any other provision of law, no adjustment shall be made under Section 601A of the Legislative Reorganization Act of 1946 to USC United States Code 4501, relating to cost of living adjustments for members of Congress during fiscal year 2021. A Facebook post claimed that a COVID-19 relief bill, quote, provides more funding to foreign governments and to American art centers than to the American people, unquote. The post conflates provisions of the $900 billion COVID-19 relief bill with provisions of a separate $1.4 trillion omnibus bill, but both were part of a broader $2.3 trillion package approved by Congress. The overall spending bill included funding for American art centers and foreign aid, but the funding was not included in the COVID-19 relief bill. It was part of the $1.4 trillion omnibus spending bill. The Facebook post contains an element of truth but ignores critical facts that would give a different impression. The WRAL has rated this fact mostly false. All right, so now we got a bit of understanding of the bit of narrative that's actually going on right now and a bit of context of the difference between the domestic funding, the foreign aid, and the COVID relief bill, all three being separate. So now we're going to begin with Ben Shapiro on Daily Wire with his opinion.
Okay, so what exactly is, let's start at the beginning. What exactly is in this COVID relief bill? According to Emily Zanotti, writing for the Daily Wire, Congress is set to pass two major spending bills on Monday, a nearly $1 trillion coronavirus relief bill and a $1.4 trillion omnibus bill in a record-setting vote that will fund hundreds of government programs and, according to lawmakers, assist individual Americans struggling to make ends meet because of COVID-19 related restrictions. The bill does, in fact, contain some help for those facing economic struggles. In addition to providing a second round of direct stimulus checks to individual taxpayers, this time $600, the bill extends federal supplemental unemployment benefits, right? That is the really big check. It's not the $600 check. It is the extension of federal supplemental unemployment benefits. The jobless, as well as gig employees experiencing a slowdown in business, can now get an extra $300 per week through mid-March. So if you are on unemployment insurance, you're really talking about like an $1,800 check every month. You're not talking about $600, you're talking about $1,800. And that is on top of whatever state aid you are getting as well. The coronavirus relief package expands paycheck protection as well, opening up $248 billion in funding for loans to struggling businesses, even as evidence emerges that millions from the first round of PPP loans went to connected corporations. This is, of course, the great risk of all of these bills is they turn into cronyism and they're jam-packed with like a bunch of crap that doesn't mean anything. This time around, the COVID-19 bill contains special grants for specific industries, $20 billion for businesses in low-income communities, $15 billion for struggling live venues, movie theaters, and museums. I'm not sure it is worthwhile bailing out movie theaters, to be perfectly frank with you. And this comes from somebody who loves movie theaters. I love movie theaters. My wife and I used to go on lots of dates to movie theaters before the COVID shutdown happened. I love seeing movies in the theater. I think it's a great tragedy that this may be a communal experience that goes the way of the dodo bird. But I don't know why we were spending $15 billion to bail out movie theaters. Not given the fact that you've got places like HBO Max that have already explained that they're going to simultaneously release things in theaters and at home, which means that people are just not going to go to theaters. I think that movie theaters are going to be the last thing to come back, and it's going to become more of a specialty thing. I don't think you're going to see movie theaters on, every other corner the way that you used to. What an
incredibly
long tangent. There are a number of breaks for businesses, according to Emily, some of which haven't gone over well on social media. The relief bill includes a 2-year tax break for business meals. This is a priority for President Trump, apparently, and rolls over a variety of temporary tax breaks known as extenders, for multiple years. The business meal deduction has been labeled the 3-martini lunch deduction, that very few people aside from key Democratic legislators in major cities are having many dine-in luncheons, as Emily Zanotti suggests. The bill also helps renters. There's a $25 billion assistance program and a continued eviction moratorium. Under the COVID-19 relief deal, $13 billion will go to food benefits, $15 billion to a program for direct payments to farmers to assist in keeping American food production afloat. Well, I wasn't aware that we had like a problem in keeping American food production afloat, considering that demand is still kind of the same in the American food markets. It's just going through different channels, just not going through restaurants. There are big handouts in the bill.
Yeah, but like restaurants are still like have to order food. Refuse to connect. That's an interesting aspect. I was just trying to do a little bit of fact check, but it doesn't look like USDA is going to let me onto their website. That's bad. That's too bad. But I know from the trade war with China, the farmers were actually hurting a bit. Let's see. All right. So this is just overall information. I needed more update from 2020, but I can't really find the update that I'm wanting to get. Oh, that's the same website. That's hilarious. Yeah, I'm not finding I'm not finding anything too specific on this. Unfortunately, it's not really reported on too hard. Let's see. Let's see here. Approximately 2 million farms throughout America in 2017. Where does our food come from? The United States imports about 15% of its total food supply. While the bulk of our meat and dairy is produced domestically, we import approximately 32% of our vegetables, 55% of our fresh fruit, and 94% of the seafood that we consume annually. Our top countries of import are Canada, Mexico, France, Italy, and China. Mexico is responsible for nearly half of our total fruits and vegetable imports, while Canada is responsible for around 19% of our total meat and fish imports, with Australia, China, and India not being far behind. Let's see, how has COVID-19 affected food producers? It is important to understand that the biggest threat to the global food supply chain as of right now isn't necessarily to production itself. In many cases, farmers have been able to produce just as much as they were before the crisis. As it stands, the production of many staple crops, such as wheat, corn, and soybeans, is largely mechanized and has therefore been less affected by the crisis as fruits and vegetables. The issue we face right now is one of transportation, where tight restriction on trade and movement have compromised the ability of food items to actually get to the market. This has led to instances of mass dumping, evocative of Great Depression era inefficiency. The food supply chain, being an intricate series of steps, can break down entirely if producers are unable to sell their goods, which might actually be the issue here, which Ben Shapiro was talking about production and not so much of consumption. Additionally, American agriculture is heavily dependent on migrant workers, up to 2.7 million of whom are undocumented. General living conditions of these workers leave them at much higher risk of infection of coronavirus, given that many live with up to 10 other people in cramped quarters, share transport, and are often subject to dangerous chemicals that can worsen coronavirus cases. More than that, they're often undocumented status leaves them largely unable to receive adequate medical care. One component of the food processing industry that is being hit particularly hard are the meatpacking plants. According to a report in the New York Times, a mere 50 slaughterhouses are responsible for around 98% of domestic meat processing. Indeed, the report noted, quote, shutting down one plant, even for a few weeks, is like closing an airport hub, unquote. As of May 7th, 15 major meatpacking facilities were offline, with American pork production having dropped by half. Grocery stores might have to reduce meat offerings by a third by Memorial Day, with prices around 20% higher. More than a third of America's total meat processing plants are located in countries with infection rates that are among the highest in the country, so more closures are expected. When they do reopen, when they do reopen, production could still be reduced by up to 15%. So there's an issue. And then also inspection workers having issues, and then, of course, the retailers have also been having to throw out food that's going bad because of lack of consumption. But apparently here, grocery shopping has increased by 26%, with online services experiencing spikes of up to 150%. Nice. So it's actually not necessarily a consumption issue either, but production could still face hindrance in certain aspects. So it's a more focused, I guess, the spending itself would need to be more focused on who exactly needs it, depending on what they grow or what they produce. Meatpacking seems to have a difficult time with the amount of people that they have possibly catching COVID and them having to stall production.
Airlines get $15 billion. Again, I'm not sure that is worthwhile. I'm not sure that the taxpayer should be paying out airlines who've experienced this shock and setback. You don't want them going bankrupt. You want them still existing, obviously. But it seems to me that airlines, it's going to be a while before people are traveling in quite the way they used to. People are not going to travel casually quite as easily for probably a couple of years, particularly if you're elderly. Airports are going to get $2 billion. Amtrak is going to get $1 billion. So I guess that leaves Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg particularly happy. Very, very romantic, Amtrak. Higher education is going to get $82 billion. Higher education should receive $0. Okay, they should not receive $82 billion. Higher education is wildly overpriced. It has been pushed up in the marketplace by federal loans in the first place. There's a good case to be made that huge swaths of higher education should be left on the cutting room floor, including many of the what we would call North Campus majors at UCLA, the liberal arts majors, should be left on the cutting room floor. I do not know why we are dumping out $82 billion to higher education, particularly at a time when you are looking at places like Harvard that have billion-dollar endowments. That makes
See, and he's actually making, I don't know, besides the liberal arts thing, but he is making, I consider, valid points about the spending, which, again, I support under the First Amendment speech. Everybody should say what they don't support their tax money going towards. But he, in his headline of his title, he's conflating this as if it's part of that relief bill, because it says here, massive COVID relief bill includes an insane amount of wasteful spending, which I guess, that section there, yeah, this is for the, this is actually for the relief bill. Okay, never mind. I thought he was talking about the omnibus in it. It's not. That specifically might actually be attached to COVID relief. I did not see that in the fact check up here, but yeah, that probably is. Yeah, it just wasn't really in this section here talking about higher education. But, yeah.
No sense to me. The U.S. Postal Service also wins big. Congress used the bill to forgive a $10 billion loan to the U.S. Postal Service, a loan they gave to the service in an earlier coronavirus relief bill. The USPS has no hope of ever paying back. States will get $20 billion to help purchase vaccines.
Yeah, but it's because they've been gutting it for like over 10 years. It's definitely, it's taken some hits, especially since it has to put so much money in reserve, like more money is in reserve for their employees' retirement than they actually could ever make. They would have to increase their prices exuberantly in order to cover that cost. When I think that we should make the government revenue actually pay for the retirement of government employees.
Vaccines and distribute them. They also get $20 billion to help with expanding COVID-19 testing. They don't get a bailout for the economic damage they've incurred during the extended virus lockdown. Democrats pushed for that. Republicans said no. On the other hand, Republicans were pushing for a limit to legal liability for corporations based on COVID, right? If they said you need to come to work if you're not sick, and then people came to work and they were sick, people were going to...
No, that's not specifically what it was. It's, if they did, let's say if you actually had a positive test and they told you to come in anyways, but it's mostly about like protecting companies from their unsafe working conditions. If they took like zero precautions of blocking people from coronavirus, say like a meat packaging plant didn't require masks or any necessary steps to protect their employees, and at a meat packing facility, because of the temperatures in it, they were at higher risk, especially working indoors. So yeah, the liability thing was obviously a cop out for companies to put let's say unhumane working conditions.
Sue these corporations. Apparently, they still can, theoretically. There are further expenditures that are now coming to light. Apparently, the final draft of the bill contains a number of handouts for Congress, including a provision paying for the additional pandemic expenditures incurred by the Congressional Daycare Center. Ooh, sounds great. And $5 million to protect members from the coronavirus by expanding testing and increasing the budget of the congressional physician. Also, the Washington, D.C. government got $38 million in reimbursements for its work controlling protests and providing security. Why? Did they do a good job with that? Did I miss the part where the Washington, D.C. government did a fantastic job controlling protests and providing security when people were literally running through downtown Washington, D.C., just breaking store windows? That seems.
I mean, we can remember the day that like William Barr and Trump had federal troops go out and push protesters back with tear gas and rubber bullets so that Trump could go to a church and take a picture. There was also an article floating around that they were thinking about using a heat ray to try and get protesters to go home. A heat ray. Like, what?
Seems
Come
like
on.
a waste of money.
Facts.
I mean, it is that big of a waste of money when it's been mostly peaceful protests. But of course, Ben Shapiro's not going to call them that. He's going to call them violent riots. Oh, yes. Oh, man, I have to actually get this Tulsi Gabbard video. We have the other ones to get into, but I want to hear what Tulsi Gabbard thinks real quick.
So joining me now is Tulsi Gabbard, Congresswoman from Hawaii.
She's a Democrat, but she, like, is just my enemy more than most Democrats, I think. But we'll see as time continues on. I do agree with her policy on ending the endless wars. But everything else, she seems to actually fit a more conservative ideal. I'm not a Democrat myself, but it's just she really grinds my gears, so I'm excited.
She is one of two House Democrats who broke with their party and voted against the stimulus bill, and she joins us now. Congresswoman, great to have you here tonight. Thank you for being here. So why did you vote against the bill?
Because this bill was a slap in the face to the American people. People who are sitting in their cars waiting in line for hours to get free food from the food bank, people who've been without jobs for months, people who are concerned about getting evicted from their apartments or their homes because they haven't been able to pay their rent.
And see, I agree with her because we've gone over like nearly 300 days since a stimulus bill was passed and help Americans pay their bills. But yeah, that I agree with her on that sentiment. But when it comes to time to actually giving them money, she just doesn't like it. I'm sure she might. I hope she argues for the fact that $600 wasn't enough after passing $1,200 like 9 months before. So 9 months since getting $1,200, Americans have just been having to deal with their situation.
To say that it's okay to give hundreds of billions of dollars to corporate special interests, to foreign countries, to the military-industrial complex, but to the American people who are struggling. And
I mean, she's sounding like a populist, anti-establishment type person because all of that is like spending as usual. It's just really being like exaggerated and hyperbolic because it's attached to the COVID relief, which was an abysmal $600.
Suffering and who need help the most, you get $600. It's an absolute insult, and the American people deserve better.
You know, on the defense bill, as I said, there is $7 billion in there. We heard from General Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that he was very concerned about the Chinese buildup of the Navy. He feels that we are unprepared in terms of our naval ships, and he wants to put that money towards that. Do you think that that is...
Because, like, even though we have the greatest military in all of the planet, if we don't have the greatest one sector of the military, if one of our branches isn't the greatest, then oh boy, we got to flood that money.
A wise idea. And how ready do you think we are, given your own experience and your service in Iraq?
Well, that's a very big topic about our defense priorities, and whether you look at the big, massive spending bill that I voted against a couple of nights ago, that's one area where we should be asking questions about how our taxpayer dollars being used in a responsible way that best serves the emergency that we are facing. I think you're also talking about this National Defense Authorization Act. I've actually voted against this bill when it came to the House floor for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a massive bloated spending bill. It heightens up the new Cold War we're in, with increasing tensions between the United States and Russia and China, really with serious consequences. We're talking about nuclear-armed nations here, and we've got to focus on how we can best de-escalate those tensions. But it also includes a provision in there that ties this president or any president's hands as they're trying to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. So, I know Trump vetoed this bill earlier today, and one of the main reasons he did so was because of this provision, Section 230, right? This thing that has to do with giving big tech companies like Google and Facebook.
Which has nothing to do with the military whatsoever. It's only Trump's pettiness and his disdain for them marking his tweets. And, it's a massive conservative talking point because it's constantly knocking down their misinformation campaign. So it's funny that Tulsi Gabbard jumps on that bandwagon. And I would not be surprised if at some point she shifts parties. And then we get a Why I Left the Left video from her too.
Facebook and Amazon, total legal immunity. And the reason why he's taken a stand on this, and I support his position on this, is because Congress has failed to act in making sure that the American people have a fair and free opportunity to the public square, and to make sure that these tech companies that are censoring people, that are choosing whose voices are heard and whose aren't, taking sides in political elections, that they are not.
I mean, she kind of gave a hint there that she's okay with misinformation. That she's okay with people who basically swerve the perspective of Americans. That's okay with her if there's an uninformed public because of misinformation, which is extremely dangerous to democracy.
Immune from lawsuits. And so I think it's a critical thing to hold Congress's feet to the fire, because I've introduced legislation to fix Section 230. Other people have as well. They have failed to take action, and the American people deserve to know that these big corporations don't have greater influence over their representatives in Congress than the American people do, which is unfortunately the situation that we're in right now.
Yeah. Just quickly before I let you go, I know that you spoke out about the fact that some members of Congress, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was showing off her vaccination. She did a cute Instagram video of, the whole thing, and it sort of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. What do you want to say about that tonight?
Look, I think of people like my aunt, who's, she's 65 years old. She has a severe underlying health condition that's compromised her immune system. She has basically been imprisoned in her home because she knows that if she goes out, she faces a very real danger of dying if she catches COVID. It is people like my aunt. It is the elderly, the most vulnerable, who should be getting this vaccine first.
I agree with her, but here's the thing, is that it was actually policy. I covered a video from Mitch McConnell who was saying that the reason why members of Congress were getting the vaccines first is because of the continuity of government. So it's not like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez paid her way ahead. She just happened to be in the right position that got her ahead of average citizens, and that's the meritocracy that we live in. That's a systemic issue, Tulsi. Don't blame it. Don't throw shade on AOC for the sake of Fox News viewers, who obviously you're trying to placate to.
Right alongside our first responders and high-risk healthcare workers, because this is really a matter of life and death for them. For others, if my colleagues, I've called on them, as members of Congress, if you are healthy, if you are under the age of 65, join me in refusing to get the vaccine until our seniors and elderly Americans are able to do so.
I guess you could refuse. I guess you could. But I think Ocasio-Cortez is taking it because she wants to show publicly that she supports vaccinations, because in this country, there's a lot of people who are anti-vax. And Tulsi Gabbard has a nice excuse that she doesn't want to take it unless the most vulnerable get it first. But I wonder if eventually, if she's going to say that she's never gotten it, she'll never need it. That would be a very interesting but not surprising turn of events. And then the next video that Fox is recommending me is Rand Paul blasts socialist spending in coronavirus relief bill. Rand Paul, so enlightened that he thinks socialism and communism is when the government does stuff. Because unless there was actual voting by the people, direct democracy, nowhere near socialism. But I'm not going to watch that video. We're going to move on to when Trump said this.
Throughout the summer, Democrats cruelly blocked COVID relief legislation in an effort to advance their extreme left-wing agenda and influence the election.
I guess so, but they also tried to pass like another round of $1,200 stimulus checks that Mitch McConnell refused to hold a vote for on the Senate. So you could actually accuse Mitch McConnell of doing the same exact thing. Because that bill came out well before the election and Trump could have signed it and looked really good doing so. But he didn't even really advocate for the Senate to take that vote up either. So, yeah, political posturing, circus, show, spectacle.
Then a few months ago, Congress started negotiations on a new package to get urgently needed help to the American people. It's taken forever. However, the bill they are now planning to send back to my desk is much different than anticipated. It really is a disgrace. For example, among the more than 5,000 pages in this bill, which nobody in Congress has read because of its length and complexity, it's called the COVID Relief Bill, but it has almost nothing to do with COVID. This bill contains $85.5 million for assistance to Cambodia.
And there you go. There you go. Trump basically being on the same side as disinformation on Facebook. He being a mouthpiece for the same kind of nonsensical shenanigans. Because the omnibus bill and the COVID relief bill could have been separate bills voted on separately, but for some reason lawmakers did decide to put them together for a single packaged vote. And unfortunately, it gave Trump the ammo to do this.
$134 million to Burma, $1.3 billion for Egypt and the Egyptian military, which will go out and buy almost exclusively Russian military equipment. $25 million for democracy and gender programs in Pakistan. $505 million to Belize, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. $40 million for the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., which is not even open for business. $1 billion for the Smithsonian, and an additional $154 million for the National Gallery of Art. Likewise, these facilities are essentially not open. $7 million for reef fish management, $25 million to combat Asian carp, $2.5 million to count the number of amberjack fish in the Gulf of Mexico, a provision to promote the breeding of fish in federal hatcheries, $3 million in poultry production technology, $2 million to research the impact of down trees, $566 million for construction projects at the FBI. The bill also allows stimulus checks for the family members of illegal aliens, allowing them to get up to $1,800 each.
But that's if those family members are filing taxes. And then if they're getting that much money, that means they have an income above $75,000 a year. So he's just attacking immigrants because, oh boy, do the nationalists love that.
This is far more.
Can you believe people who are related to undocumented immigrants are getting money? How dare they?
Than the Americans are given. Despite all of this wasteful spending and much more, the $900 billion package provides hardworking taxpayers with only $600 each in relief payments. And
that's if you're if you're at $75,000 or lower. Anything above that actually gets more money. And, again, nobody's really making that clear that people who already make more money are getting more money. Meritocracy, anybody?
Not enough money is given to small businesses, and in particular restaurants, whose owners have suffered so grievously. They were only given a deduction for others to use in business their restaurant for two.
He's talking about that tax credit, but he seems to be ignoring the extension of the PPP loans, which has been very consistent federally. They've done that more often than they've done stimulus checks.
2 years. This 2-year period must be withdrawn, which will allow the owners to obtain financing and get their restaurants back in condition. Congress can terminate it at a much later date, but 2 years is not acceptable. It's not enough. Congress found plenty of money for foreign countries, lobbyists, and special interests while sending the bare minimum to the American people who need it. It wasn't their fault. It was China's fault, not their fault.
It's China's fault.
Asking Congress to amend this bill and increase the ridiculously low $600 to $2,000 or $4,000 for a couple. I'm also asking Congress to immediately get rid of the
Wouldn't they get $4,000 if they're a couple, technically? What? Do you just have to show that you're in a relationship, Trump? What?
wasteful and unnecessary items from this legislation, and to send me a suitable bill, or else the next administration will have to deliver a COVID relief package, and maybe that administration will be me, and we will get it.
I feel like he did that whole thing just to say that at the end. To still say that he can win the election, you know, because he's got to rile up the base up until January 6th when he wants them to really go wild in the streets of D.C.
Done. Thank you very much.
What a dirtbag. All right, so, and that's where that was on December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas, before the birth of this nation's Lord and Savior. And then immediately, right after that,
News alert, President Trump averting a government shutdown, signing the massive $2.3 trillion spending bill, which includes $900 billion in coronavirus relief.
The emergency fund.
And yeah, he signed it anyways. He literally never says what he actually means. And since we've hit about the hour mark, I'm going to have to hit a pause, and we will be right back with more talks, news. Gotta give it to the masses. The masses.